Welcome to the Real Freedom Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Ryan Weimer.
And today I got Cory with me. Cory, thanks for that introduction, man.
Absolutely.
You've been practicing.
No, I've just been on a lot of caffeine this morning, ready to get going.
It's the same thing. I love it. All right, guys. So today we're going to go over the 13 ways to get less deals under contract. That's right. Ways to fail at getting more properties under contract.
Wait, you want to make less money?
Why would we do that, right? Well, some of the greats, Albert Einstein did this, Charlie Munger did this. We as humans, we have a natural inclination to avoid danger. Instinctually, a lot of times we know what not to do much easier than what to do. And so using that is a really powerful frame when we don't know the next thing to do is. We don't know how to get started. We don't know how to put more deals under contract. We don't know how to get more confident. All of these things that not only apply to wholesaling real estate, but entrepreneurship in general, relationships, life, right? So again, we're going to use that frame of what not to do. And then you're going to have to think when you're listening to this, how this applies to you in what's the opposite? What's the opposite of that thing? And that's what I need to do more of. So for example, if I wanted to not achieve my fitness goals, what would I do?
I'd probably eat a lot of junk food, never work out, probably get limited sleep.
Okay. And so what would be the opposite of that?
Yeah, doing all those things. So going to work out consistently, having maybe a meal prep or plan, and then actually tracking what I eat.
So some of these are going to hit home with both of us. I'm going to get vulnerable on quite a few. You're going to struggle through these cycles of self-doubt, of not knowing what the next thing to do is, feeling stuck, feeling anxiety. That's when you need to use this frame of like, well, I don't know what to do next, but let me think of what not to do. Like, what would I not do? Okay. So let's roll right into it. Number one is an obvious one, not taking action.
Yeah, the easiest way to fail is just not do anything.
Yeah. And this probably applies to 95% of people, right? Is they have this hope and wish. And it's easier to blame other people because it makes them feel better than it is to blame yourself and actually get better. And I like using that frame of, if you want to feel better, blame other people. If you want to get better, blame yourself. That's about taking extreme ownership and accountability. What are some reasons people don't take action?
It's usually fear. It's fear of failure or fear of maybe not being good enough at what you do. And then if you actually try and you fail, then you have to admit to yourself that you did that, which is tough. Right?
Yeah.
We all fail.
100%. Here's a real life application of that. Me and my wife now do annual goal setting with each other. We pick like 5 or 6 categories, fitness, relationship, business, financial, traveling, or recreational, family, like whatever you want your buckets to be, right? The first time that we ever did this exercise, massive amount of friction. And she was incredibly hesitant to even write anything down. Why? Because she knew writing them down meant she was going to have to be accountable to them. And she was so afraid of not hitting those, because not hitting those would mean not only is that a failure, but that she's a failure. Now, the more years that go on, now she's even more pro goal setting than I am. But it took like 5 years of that for her to get to that point. Every year would get a little bit better, a little bit easier.
That happened in my relationship too.
Okay.
Yeah, she's the one who like proactively, as we're getting up to the beginning of the year, says, when are we going to schedule that now? Because she's looking forward to it.
Yeah, because the first time, and here's a hint, right? If you're struggling with that, or you're like, man, another year and I haven't started my side hustle, another year I haven't gotten any deals under contract, whatever, chunk down. So that was our first year doing it. It's like, what's something that you know you could accomplish? And for her, it was like work out at least once a week or whatever that is. And so then when the year's up and she's done it, what happens to her confidence bucket? She gets a little bit more in her confidence bucket, right? Then the next year, she can set a little bit more audacious, and then she can keep proving to herself that she can do it. So that's my advice, is chunk down whatever those small wins are. Maybe it's talking to 5 property owners a day. Maybe it's talking to 1 property owner a day. Like whatever that is, do that. That'll help build that muscle. Anything else about dealing with fear when it comes to not taking action? Because that's what it boils down to, right? Is there's something inside of you that you either care what other people think, you have a low self-esteem of yourself. How about a prisoner of a poor mindset of I'm not in control of my circumstances? Rich people are rich and they're just born that way. Financially well-off people just inherit money. I'm in a bad situation and I'm never going to get out of it. How do people deal with that?
Education and time.
Yeah.
It's getting around the right people. And even if those people are podcasts, there's so many people that put out like motivational good content that if you eventually start listening to that and then reading books about it, and then you fill yourself with that, eventually it's going to change your mindset. And I'll just say for myself, it is really triggering now when I get around family members who don't have that. And like, it's so easy for me to see now, but 5 years ago, I didn't have that perspective. You're going to grow at different paces than other people around you at times. And when you do, like, you just have to be cognizant that other people may not be in the space you are anymore. And that creates friction.
But I think that's the sad reality is if your inner circle is not, we all have a forced inner circle, right? Of friends and family members.
Mm-hmm.
Your family, you can't choose.
Mm-hmm.
Those are just the people you inherently spend the most time with, right? How do you create an environment that fosters a growth mindset of, I can do what I want to do. I need to set realistic expectations with myself, which we're going to come to one of the ones later.
Yeah.
But how do you get out of that hamster wheel of not, having people with a poor mindset around you that you can't really escape?
Generally, you have to put yourself into uncomfortable situations with people that you probably respect or even like you admire, but you're fearful of being around them. And that kind of wears off.
Give me an example.
Yeah. So let's say it's real estate.
Yeah.
Every city in the US has a real estate meetup. And you're going to go there, and that's action. And you're going to find people who are way ahead of you. And you're going to look at them and say, wow, how could I get there? I could never get there. And then you talk to them, and there's just another person who just did something for a period of time and achieved some amount of success. And then you go back, and then all of a sudden you've started to realize that like they're not that much different than you. They just took action, and then they encourage you to take action. The worst thing you can do is go to that and then view it like it's entertainment and then not do anything, which I think comes back to the next piece, which is like fear, which is like, how do I set up my environment to have a trigger to say like, just do the thing. Alex Hormozy has a great post on this. It's like, just do the thing. And then he lists like 20 different ways of things that you could do that would feel like you're doing it, but you're not actually doing the thing. And like, let's just chunk it down to like making one call to a seller. It's like you're sweating. There's so much fear. Like every time we bring on a new hire, that first time they click the dial button, it's like, oh my gosh, who's going to answer at the other end? Are they going to yell at me? What do I say? It's going to go terribly. And then they get through it. And so set up the trigger to say like, I have to just push the button, whatever the button is. And if you just push the button and then you pause, then like whatever's going to happen happens after, and then you'll grow from that. You'll overcome it. Like you said, it'll add to your confidence bucket. What
are some ways, instead of making a call, that you'd pretend to be taking action that feel good, but you're not actually doing the thing?
I'm going to go to the meetup, and then I'm never going to put any of it into practice. I'm going to listen to the podcast, and then I'll listen to another podcast, because if I listen to 20 podcasts, I'll get one bit of information that maybe will make it the big difference.
Oh, dude, okay. This really grinds my gears. The people that are like, I'm going to read 20 books this year. It's like, what is wrong with you? Like, what are you getting from these books? Like, if you're reading for recreation, for entertainment, I can understand that. But if you're reading to get better, it's not about how many books you read. It's about what are you getting from the one book that you read, and what are you implementing?
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I haven't read a book in years because I still haven't implemented all the things from the books that I have read. How many times have we read Sales Acceleration Formula?
5, 6, every time.
Because every time there's a new thing that you have to implement. Yeah. And that's the thing. Sometimes these things take months or years to implement.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go read another book and then we get distracted and try to do those things, you lose all the compounding effects of dedicated time and focus into one thing. And that actually lowers your confidence. So that's the thing too, right? With not taking action, shiny object syndrome is a way for you to feel like you're jumping onto you're trying stuff, right? There's like this, it's much easier to blame the thing than it is yourself, right? So most people think like, well, I just need to find the thing. It's like, no, you've just tried 1% of 100 things, and you think that that equals 100% into one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. It's like
No.
it's like that analogy of building a bunch of bridges, and you'll
Absolutely.
never actually make your way there.
Anything else on not taking action? This is like 95, 96% of people. So
I think it goes into the next one, which is expectation setting. So we should probably talk about that as it comes up.
okay. Well, number 2 I had was, and I think 99% of people fall into either number 1, not taking action, or number 2, you're not consistently generating leads, or you're not generating enough leads. 99% of people will fall into those 2 things. So if you're listening to this or watching this, after we go through these 2, you should stop and think about, what am I actually going to do to address those? Because those only 1% of people are going to be even past those. Those are the most common problems I see. So why do people struggle generating leads, or underestimating the amount of leads that it'll take to be successful?
It's just expectations that are misaligned. Like, nobody knows how hard it's going to be, even if you heard somebody say it, until you've experienced it. Like, you don't know how many you're going to actually have to produce to get one person who's actually interested in selling. A good analogy for this is, we just brought on some new hires, and part of our new hire training is like, we force them day 1 to get on the phones and start making calls, because it builds that skill set and that action. And every single time without fail, day 1 or day 2, they have one conversation. And it's like the first 20 conversations they had. And they're like, I got a really hot lead. Like, they want to do this, and they told me this. And I'm like, okay, great. And what'd you do next? And like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, did you schedule an appointment? No, I didn't schedule an appointment. Okay. But what do you think I should do with this one lead? And I was like, I don't know. Call 50 more. Like,
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's the thing.
Is just call more people, because you don't know what you don't know yet. And just put in the effort.
Yeah. And so much of this, what I've found to be true, is people that struggle with it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy where, like, if I have an abundance of leads that I'm talking to, it doesn't matter what business I'm in or what activity I'm doing. If I have an abundance, it's like I'm going to the driving range, right? And I'm golfing and I'm practicing my swing. If I've got 3 balls left in my bucket, it's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking on, like, I hope these are my last 3 swings, and then I'm going home. Like, am I going to feel good about my practice or not?
Mm-hmm.
And I only have 3 opportunities there. Whereas when I start my session and I've got 35, 60 balls in my bucket, I know that I'm going to get 60 swings, and I'm a lot more loose. I'm a lot more relaxed. I can experiment with a few things. I can try a few more techniques, and I'm just way more confident going in, right? It's the exact same thing in business and lead flow. And so the more leads you have, the more appointments you go on, the more people you talk to, what do you know? You have more confidence, because you care about each one a little bit less. And that arms you with the ability to not have to chase, but to be that reluctant, I don't need this deal. I don't need this business. I'm the inherent expert. I'm the trusted expert. I'm the trusted advisor.
Yeah, it just takes time. And that's the hard part for people, is they want it to be now, and it's never now. And especially if you're a solopreneur, like, if you don't know what to do and you like get a list of 100 people, you assume, because you're hopeful that one of those is going to turn into something. And then when it doesn't, then it's like, oh, how much more work do I have to put in?
So we've talked about this before, and I know we have actually differing views on this. When I started out cold calling, because it was more or less free, I had to pay for the data and the dialer, right? But it was like a couple $100 a month, so it was reasonable for me. And I had no skills, no sales skills. I was an engineer, negative sales skills, awful. It took me 450 no's to get that first contract. Do you think if I had known that it would take 450 no's, that would encourage action or discourage action?
For you?
Yes.
I think for you, it would encourage action.
Okay.
I think for most people, it discourages action.
Okay. So you think if people know how many leads it takes to get a deal, how many hours or minutes it would take to get a deal, they would look at that and say, nah, there's easier things to do out there.
I think if they knew that, but I think a lot of people would break if they got to 451 and it didn't work out.
Ah, okay.
And that's where the expectation comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the one thing we've been trying really hard to work on, at least when we bring new people on, is trying to reset their expectations, show them, like, here's what's possible, but here's probably where you're going to fall. And it's okay to feel overwhelmed, and it's okay to get rejected, and it's okay that you're going to fail a whole bunch. And as long as you're putting in the effort, you're going to get there.
So you really want to talk about expectations. You keep jumping into that
I
one.
do, because I think it's the root of everything, really.
Yeah.
If you put in the work, then it's just, can I live with myself and the expectations until the results pay off?
Yeah, just one more thing on generating leads. What we find constantly in our org is everybody wants the new leads. So then always, right? It's the new bright and shiny thing. And so even though you have hundreds or thousands of leads in your database, when a new one comes in, it gets exponentially more attention than old ones because people are looking for the easy wins, the easy appointment or easy contract. But if you can treat every lead the same as, hey, how many no's did it take me to even just get that lead? And it's been sitting in my database for 2 months. When's the last time I talked to them? If you can treat that with the same intensity, same intentionality and follow-up schedule as you can a new lead that comes in, you're going to have way more success because you're actually valuing the time and effort that you put in. It's very easy for us to forget about all the time it took for us to get that lead because we've already moved on in our head to the next one.
Every single person that has ever come in, myself included, will look through a list and look at like the most recent notes and like, oh, I don't need to call them. I don't need to call them. I don't need to call them. Every single time.
Yeah. Number 3, this is the one you want to talk about the most. Number 3, having delusional expectations for outcomes. Because it's always harder than you think it's going to be. It always takes more time and it always costs more money.
Yeah. The expectations for success, like I think people like have to hope. You have to hope, you have to be able to dream about what's going to be next. It's just very rarely do people expect it to take as long as it will. And so it's getting through that mental hurdle, especially with the new folks we bring on, that it's a real challenge. So we'll tell them it's going to take you 6 to 10 months to start to see real income coming in from this in excess of what you get for your base. And they hear that. They say, 6 months, but I'm better than that. So it'll be 3 months. Okay, great. We've had a couple people who it takes like maybe in their first 3 months, they get 1, 2, or 3 contracts. Like, great, I'm going to have 3 contracts month 1. And then when they don't get that, they're like, well, this doesn't work.
They blame the thing.
Yeah, then they say, this doesn't work. So
Yeah.
I didn't make this work.
At the beginning of the show, we talked about using this frame as the opposite. What would be an applicable, because salespeople and driven people, we always want to see results, partially because we have high goals and we want to achieve greatness, but also because we need those affirmations along the way that tell us you are on the right path. I think that's a big piece of it because what you just said, it's easy to blame the thing and jump to another thing if you don't have confidence that you are on the right path because you're not getting enough of the affirmations that you need. So what would be, if we say a great way to not get deals is to have unrealistic expectations, what would be the opposite of that? How would you flip that on its head to set yourself up for success and getting more deals?
Yeah, probably pull like a Grant Cardone style and say like, what do I think it's going to take? And then 10x that. And then say, great, if I'm working towards the 10x goal of that, and then if that's my measure of success, like if it's 100 people I have to talk to and I make it 1,000, and at call 950, it hits, well, now I feel like I won. Like that little exercise can completely change the way you feel about it, but then it also resets like how much work you actually have to put in because it is going to take longer than you expect.
So let me play devil's advocate here because you're a very analytical minded person. When does the thing come into play? So like, let's say I use the 10x way of thinking like you're talking about, right? Okay, in my head, I think it's going to take 4 months. If I 10x that, let's just say I turn months into years. Okay. And I say to myself, I'm going to spend 4 years at this.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. It's also not a long time. Depends on your frame of reference and how you look at it. But what if I spent those 4 years doing something else? And I think this is where people get tripped up. They have no frame of reference for these kind of comparisons, but they do make them in their mind and they make assumptions. What's the right way and wrong way to go about that?
Oh, that's a great question. What's the right way and wrong way? I think your point of chunking it down is something that's really helped me, which is if we can see measurable progress towards a thing, and usually that starts with skill sets. And so like if my goal is not to get a contract week 1, but it's to learn how to answer these 5 objections, and I make progress towards those, I know that that's going to help me get there. And then it's to schedule so many appointments. Well, then if I schedule so many appointments, then it's going to get me there. And then if I attend so many appointments, it's going to get me to the contract. And those things I think can help chunk it down and make it measurable. The hard part is like if you set a goal for yourself, like if I don't achieve X by X date, I am a failure. It is a failure. The thing is a failure. That's where it becomes hard, because if you have made progress towards that and then you view it as still that you've moved the target, and it's like the Dan Sullivan book of like who, not how.
Yeah.
It all comes back to expectations.
I think I've been so guilty of this many times. Inherently, we just think we're better than we are.
Yeah.
We always think we're better than we are, right?
Just naturally ignorant of everything we don't know.
Yeah, 100%. I had an interview with someone looking to join our sales team a couple days ago. And I could tell that he was not clear on what he wanted because he was just kind of naive. He had limited experience, but was very, very driven and wanted to achieve. And I think that's the most difficult part is it's like, yeah, but you just don't know what you don't know yet. How do you give somebody that feedback? How do you know if you're a person like that? Maybe you're listening to this or watching this and you're like, how do I know if I'm self-sabotaging myself?
That's really hard to do in the moment. It's a lot easier in retrospect
and
to look at.
So maybe that is the frame, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, what were you 6 months ago? We talk about the gap and the gain all the time, right? Like sometimes we get so bogged down into what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, accomplish. It can feel like we're not getting better because we're always working on things that we suck at, right?
Which is just the path of growth.
Exactly. But then if we look back a year ago and we're like, oh my gosh, we grew 72% revenue from last year. Whoa.
Yeah. It's something I personally struggle with a lot, is like, because it is getting bogged down in the details, and then we chunk it down to look at the month, and the month was bad. We're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing wrong? And then all of a sudden you step back and you look at the quarter and you're like, oh, actually that was okay. Then you step back and look at 6 months, you're like, okay, that's okay. But again, it's in retrospect of it rarely happens in the moment. And so if you're in the moment, the only thing you can do is try to ask yourself, like you said, what happened 6 months ago that I'm proud of, and where did I grow from? If you are getting into this business, I've mentioned this before, but my favorite exercise is to have people's first call recording and save that so they can see how much they've grown from it. And then if you do that for like a period of time, even if it's just one call recording you save on your personal computer or to Google Cloud, whatever, and then you can be like, here's the quality of conversation I had and here's what I'm having now. Those make a big difference when you hear yourself.
Oh, I love that. Dude, so I actually heard Mr. Beast, the YouTube guy. He did this where he would record, it was either every 6 months or a year, he would record himself saying what his goals were of like, man, if I could have 100 subscribers by this, that would be incredible. And then a couple years later, it'd be like, well, if I could have 10,000 subscribers by a certain date, or, you know, this much interaction on my video, or this many people talk about my video, or whatever that measure is for himself. And every single time it was that sobering reflection moment for him where he was like, wait a minute, years ago I said that once I got to this point I would be insert happiness, fulfilled, have all the things I want in life or whatever. And then every time when he blew past him, it was like, I'm resetting the goalposts. But I love that tip of like, what's your flag that you plant in the sand of your frame of reference? Like, what's that point in time that you can refer back to and have that affirmation of like, holy crap, I have improved.
But that also takes me intentional. You have to do that. And that's where like having like a coach, a mentor, or like working in a business, like they're not recording that. They don't even think to do it. But because we've seen people go through this process, then we started to put this in place.
Okay. Bringing it back to expectation setting. How can one be realistic about expectations that they're setting?
I think it depends on the business that you're in. We talked about trying to 10x, but also just getting around people who are actually doing that and then asking them for honest feedback.
Yeah.
Not the Instagram version of the feedback. Not like, great, I worked 15 minutes and made $20,000.
Yeah.
Like, that's bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can't have the proper expectations though until you have clarity on what and why you're doing something. So like if you want let's just call it like it is and just choose your average like American family, right? You want a stable job, you want a house to raise your kids in, you want security and safety, and then you want to be able to retire when you're 60 and live the life that whatever is left that you want, right? I think that that's horrible, but that's your average person that thinks that. What might be expectations that somebody could set with themselves for someone looking to break out of that mold of like, I don't want to be average, I want to be different, and I'm accepting the fact that I'm going to be different and people aren't going to agree with me, and people are going to look at me and be like, why does that guy work so much? You should take time off, you should take a vacation, you should spend more time with your family, you should blank, blank, blank.
Yeah, you kind of just have to get in different circles.
Yeah.
You have to surround yourself with people who've done things that you want to do.
But how do I figure out what I want?
That takes time. It takes a lot of soul searching. And what you want can be whatever you want. Like you don't have to justify that to people. Like people who generally are pretty successful, like get okay wanting things that they don't have to justify. They just want to achieve them and then they go do it. And so like that's a path and a progress, and like you have to be comfortable doing that because you're going to do it enough times that you're going to say no to enough things that you're going to start to get there.
Yeah, I think it's about giving yourself grace too, that I reserve the right to change my mind because life changes, perspective changes, economic climates change, family things pop up, your priorities shift as you get older, right? Like giving yourself the grace that I can change my mind and I can reset my expectations on what I truly want or is important is very, very vital starting out. If you don't give yourself that kind of flexibility, then you're just going to beat your head against the wall and get frustrated.
Yeah, I think it was in Personality Isn't Permanent. They talk about how everyone's perspective is that 10 years from now, you'll be a very similar version of you. But if you look 10 years back, you are always wildly different.
Yeah.
And people assume that stops changing, especially like, okay, maybe I was 10 to 20 and like, oh, well, of course that's a period of change, and then 20 to 30. But then by the time you're 60, your perspectives again have changed from when you were 50. And people never look back and see that, but they're always changing your personality and your perspectives.
Let me close this one out by telling a personal story and getting a little bit vulnerable here. So when Offer Now, Idaho, I got started in 2019. Actually, we bought our first rental property in 2018. And then 2019 was when we started doing direct to seller stuff. We had that incredible, unprecedented price appreciation during COVID, right? Where anything you got under contract would go up the next month, no matter what. Interest rates were at record lows. You couldn't lose. There was that 1 month where COVID happened and everyone was like freaking out, like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? But then prices went absolutely bananas. And so I watched my net worth increase at a completely unrealistic and dramatic clip from buying these properties and seeing them appreciate. And not that I thought that that was normal, but I thought, man, if you even get half of this a year, what does that look like? And so then you start getting a little bit overconfident in your decision making because you lack the perspective of someone that's been through multiple cycles. It's not that you're ignoring the numbers, but your only frame of reference is what you're doing. You have voices that are saying like, be careful or whatever, but you're like, how could there's no possible way that something could interrupt this. And so I made some decisions financially, placing some big bets on development deals. And I call them bets because I was new at them. So I was actually, before I took on that development deal that I ended up losing 1.2 million on, you and I had multiple conversations about that because I was actually struggling on should I do this or not, because it's my first development deal. And the frame of mind that I used with you was like, if I don't make anything on this, but I just learn a bunch of lessons, that's okay for me. What I underestimated was that
the downside risk.
Yeah, the downside risk is that it could be a complete knockout blow. And so you're talking about having no expectations, then having wild expectations during COVID, and then having almost a knockout blow in one deal. Everything else is going really good, but just having one deal almost be a knockout blow. The roller coaster of expectation resetting throughout that process, both up and down. I mean, it took me a while after that event to actually embrace and come to terms with, I actually don't know how long it's going to take for me to get out of all those lawsuits and everything that are still happening in the background with losing that much money on a deal and all the drama that happened with it, and recoup all those losses. Before, when it happened, I was like, all right, in a year and a half, I'll be good. And then a year and a half happened, and it'd be like, because then you start to lose confidence in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I'm setting expectations of like, man, I'll be back to where I was, both from like a psychological perspective and a financial perspective and all these things. And then when that doesn't happen, then you're like, oh my gosh, it could take another year. What did I just do? I just sabotaged myself again. I doubled down on the sabotage because then I put another year on it. It could take 10 years. It could take 20 years, right? But then, so the reason that I'm sharing this is because this actually happened to me. So it took me a while, it took me multiple years, but then I was just like, I have to accept the fact that I don't know when the ship will be righted from all this, when all the lawsuits will be solved, when I'll make all that money back. Like I just have to embrace what I'm doing today and take action and not know. And dude, the not knowing part is the worst.
Mm-hmm.
It's the worst. So I wanted to close with that, with a real story of that, because if you allow yourself to set those expectations, that can be the point where you don't meet those 2 or 3 times, 4 times, 5 times in a row, and then you can quit. Because then you're saying to yourself, I'm setting these expectations that I think are realistic. I'm not meeting them. It's the thing. Done. I quit. That's what most people do.
Yeah. That's a really hard cycle to get out of. Because then like the question is like, when do you stop? When do I pivot?
You don't.
That's the hard thing for most people.
Yeah, you don't. Because it's not the thing, it's you. Right? Like the vehicle and whatever you're choosing, as long as that aligns with what you're trying to go to in the future, that's the thing, right? Is why would I allow one deal that's gone really wrong to impact the 99% of all the other deals that have gone really right?
It's the biggest scar.
Yes.
And that's what a lot of people do because it's so damaging to them psychologically, which we've all had this, like we've all failed in ways that like some people like don't eat a food again if they throw it back up afterwards. And it's like that same thing, just it's just how we're wired.
That's a great example. Yeah. I'd never thought about that. That's so true.
Yeah.
Even if it's like, that sucks when it's a really good food, when it's like pizza or something that you really enjoy.
Like, they're like, oh, that memory that it's lodged in there. I can't ever do that again.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4, bringing it to real estate wholesaling specific, or maybe you're trying to find off-market deals. How to get less deals under contract. Cash is your only offering. So you're only going in, and your only way to pick up properties is with a cash offer. You don't have creative financer terms. You don't have novations. You don't have realtor referrals. You don't have installment method. You don't have flips. Talk to us, Cory, about our cycle of evolution when interest rates changed and why now we have 4 different offerings to sellers and how that's impacted us.
Yeah, so the impact is that we can genuinely say we're going in to provide more options than anyone else, and we can do so with confidence. And we're going to walk you through the process, and then if one of those 4 options is not going to work for you, great. We're going to point you in another direction. But it just gives the people that we walk into, like all of our sales reps have that in their repertoire, so that way they can speak confidently about it and know that they're going and trying to provide value. Because you're not just trying to negotiate someone down to the lowest price where it's a I won versus you. You can actually create win-win situations that way. But the biggest reason is that it was a bit of a necessity, right? When the market starts depreciating, everyone's expectations are sky high still. Cash offers look a lot less sexy and attractive. And so when those expectations of the people we're meeting with are lagging 6 months or a year to what they were back in the peak rates when things are exploding, all of a sudden you have to put new things on the table. So that's where creative finance can get really great, where we meet with somebody who has a 3, 4, 5% interest rate, and maybe they have limited equity. The cash option's not going to work. They'd have to write a check to that. Okay, but we can help them move on and get out of their house. Example, there's a couple that we just went under contract with that tried listing their property for 6 months. Reduced, took it off, tried it again. Finally, after they got hit by reality, they're like, I can't write a check. a divorced couple moving separate directions. We don't have the funds to do that, but they can sell creative finance, and that gives us an option to help them. Same way with like novations, it gives us the chance to give people a little bit more money and do the thing they don't want to do, which is they're terrified of handling the process of actually listing, cleaning their house, and dealing with marketing, and then dealing with negotiations because they just haven't done it. So they want someone to take that burden off them so they can focus on moving. Great. Well, a novation can get them a little higher price, allow them to achieve their goals, and do that.
Love that. So if you're listening to this, on the flip side, just to talk about the lessons we've learned along the way, I would highly suggest, if you're listening to this and you're only cash right now, just choose one other thing.
Yeah.
Choose creative finance or terms or novations or something like installment contracts. Do not, or realtor referrals, right? Do not try to do 3 or 4 at once. We've only added each of these like one a year tops. It's really been like every other year where we add one of these because, okay, now we understand it fully. We have enough lead flow to justify it. Hey, the market's declining, so the macroeconomics warrant that we provide this option. Otherwise, we just can't get as many deals as we want and make the amount of money we want to make. There's a lot of factors that go in, but that is absolutely critical. If you bring on somebody new to our team,
it's always cash.
Yeah. Do you tell them to do, hey, here's 4 options you can pitch to the seller, go.
Yeah, I know you don't even know our script yet, but here's the other 4 things you need to teach them. Does not work.
Self-destruct.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about doing one thing really well each time. Even now with 4 options, when we first bring people on cash only, then we slowly graduate them to either terms or novation and go from there.
Yep, every time.
Every time. At Offer Now Idaho, we're looking to hire A players to run our organization and help us grow our business. But in what other field can you be talking to people on a regular basis that need help from losing everything, but that is finally in enough pain where they're ready to change their life? We're out there meeting with these people that need our help. Nobody else is there.
Some of the things that I'm honestly most proud of are the conversations where we had a tangible impact and didn't get the deal. I know that doesn't add to the bottom line, but it does help in reciprocity and putting goodwill out in the world. I was also an engineer, and I was so many levels removed from having a direct impact on an individual that if you've never had that experience and you're saying, well, I want to be able to look at my family members and said, here's the impact I've had. This is a position will allow you to do that. No matter what seat you're in, you can have a direct impact, and it is such a cool feeling that I didn't appreciate until it happened.
Right now, we have a $3,000 referral program. If you know somebody that's looking for a new role, we will pay you $3,000 once that person is hired by us and they hit their 90-day mark. So if you know of anybody that's looking for a new job or looking to change their life, shoot me a DM at RealRyanWeimer on Instagram.
Let's get it.
What do you think having different offerings has added to our bottom line? We were looking at this a little bit yesterday.
Yeah, I think in 2024, it was close to 500, 600,000 in novations that we didn't have in 2023.
Yeah. So you're talking like 30% of our revenue.
Yeah.
No more.
I think more, a substantial portion.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's actually less. It was like 20 to 25% of our revenue.
Okay.
But still, that came from zero. So
yes,
we just created that out of thin air. It's not something that we would have been able to do otherwise.
Correct. Yeah, it just gave us so many other options. And even if we got that language in there, we set the right expectations on the timeline. And then if we closed on it ourselves because we're like, this deal is way too big, we should flip this. Like there's 2 or 3 of those that ended up being big deals that we pitched the right way, set the right expectations, and then took down ourselves through flip.
Yeah. Also, I'm just thinking back to when we were first trying novations.
Oh, we sucked. We were
or
so
first
bad.
trying creative finance. Oh my gosh. That's the thing too, is how many agents did we have to go through? How many realtors did we have to go through? How many title agents did we have to go through?
Mm-hmm.
How many moments with the sales team where like they didn't get it and they didn't feel comfortable pitching it did we have to go through? It took us with novations a solid 6 months, and how many failures?
A lot. Every single time we went out to pitch it.
Yeah.
And the biggest things, we had to convince ourselves first. Like, why would somebody do this? This doesn't make any sense. And then once we were confident in it, we could teach the sales team, and then we could bring their confidence level up. And then when we introduced that, because we'd done it a few times to new agents, we would say, this is what you're going to do, and here's why it works, and here's how it's worked in the past. Same thing with title.
Okay. Number 5 way to get less deals under contract. not following up on your leads. Can you extrapolate on that?
Well, if I think everything's going to be a one-call close, and then I get 100 leads, and none of them are one-call closes, I guess I'm just out of business. I guess I'll just stop. Or you actually do follow-up because it's a timing game for most people.
So what's something we see now in our database?
A lot of leads that just go uncontacted for long periods of time because they got moved into a longer-term follow-up, like a cold bucket, and then they just sit there. And people are like, well, they're cold. They're not ever going to sell. Instead of not now.
I think you're being gracious. We have these kind of canned conversations all the time, right? We're like, why? It's not even cold leads. It's like, this has been in your hot follow-up. This has been in your manual follow-up. This has been in your negotiation status. And you're not.
You're talking about like a closer. You're talking about our acquisition reps. Really?
Yeah. Well, both. If you're, it doesn't matter if you're setting the appointment or if you've already met with them and you're close to signing a contract. What is up with that? Why do people do that? They don't. Why? If someone's close to signing a contract, why are you not talking to them multiple times a day, every day?
I think I heard Eric Brewer say it best when he said, well, most of our acquisition reps would assume that if I met with them and they didn't sign a contract, they weren't going to sign a contract. And then they just write them off, which is so incorrect. It's just that they needed time and they needed to go through the process and they weren't ready yet. Yeah.
So much of what we do is a timing thing, like you said, and time kills all deals, right?
Mm-hmm. And so then they're like, oh, they didn't sign. They're not going to sign.
Yeah.
Is the perspective instead of they didn't sign because, and then we don't address the because.
I think most people, this is a lack of skill as well, of not knowing what to do. When I get a no, when I get a maybe next week, hey, call me next month, maybe next spring, when they hear these kinds of things from sellers or any objections, regardless of what your industry is, they don't know the next question to ask to get to that truth. Mm-hmm. Because lead management is all about getting to the truth. Like if someone's saying, I'm going to wait until next spring, what most people do is are like, okay, I'll mark a follow-up for right before next spring. Move on to the next.
Or they'll say like, call me back in October. And then they'll call them back in October.
In October, yeah. Why? That's the point. You guys, you have to ask the right questions to find out what their situation is. How can we know if they're even worth following up with in October? What if they say something like, in October, I really like the colors in Colorado and I want to go move there, but I'm only going to do that if a place with a spectacular view of the aspens turning yellow becomes available, and I'm going to trade all my equity to go purchase that, and I'm probably going to list the property. Like, what if that's their reason for October? That's not somebody that we want to follow up with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number one is, how do we get to the truth?
Yeah.